What happens when a father discovers the darkest secret his wife has been hiding? How long can lies stay buried before the truth breaks free? In the quiet highlands of Vietnam, a chance conversation with neighbors is about to shatter everything one man believed about his family. Stay with us to witness the moment when truth finally comes to light. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the small village as the old man finished his work at the local dock. His weathered hands, calloused from years of labor, moved with practiced efficiency as he secured the last boat. He had been working far from home for months, trying to earn enough to support his family while his son remained in prison for his reckless mistakes. As he walked through the village market picking up vegetables for dinner, he noticed a group of neighbors gathered near the well. Their voices carried on the mountain breeze, and he caught fragments of their conversation. At first, he paid little attention, but then he heard two names that made his heart stop: Huyen and Maya. "I still remember that night," one elderly woman was saying, shaking her head with sadness. "It was so cold, and there was that young mother carrying her little girl. The child couldn't have been more than 3 years old. They had nowhere to go." Another neighbor chimed in. "The mother-in-law was so cruel. She literally pushed them out the door, threw their few belongings after them. That poor woman, Huyen, was crying, begging for shelter just for the night. But the old woman wouldn't listen." The old man's blood ran cold. His feet felt rooted to the ground as he listened, unable to move, unable to breathe. "I offered them my shed that night," the first woman continued. "It wasn't much, just a broken shelter, but at least it kept the rain off their heads." The little Maya was shivering so badly. Huyen tried to keep her warm with just one thin blanket. "And to think," another voice added, "the mother-in-law told her husband that Huyen had abandoned the family, just left without a word. Such a terrible lie. We all saw what really happened, but we were afraid to get involved in family matters." The old man felt his world tilting. His mind raced back to the day he had returned from his work trip, months after his son had been imprisoned. His wife had greeted him with tears, telling him that Huyen had taken Maya and disappeared in the night, abandoning the family without gratitude or explanation. She had painted Huyen as ungrateful, selfish, someone who couldn't bear the shame of having a husband in prison. He had believed every word. He had spent months harboring anger toward his daughter-in-law, thinking she had stolen away his precious granddaughter. Whenever he thought of little Maya, his heart ached with the belief that Huyen had selfishly kept the child from him. But now, standing in the market with the truth washing over him like ice water, he realized he had been deceived. His own wife had lied to him. Worse than that, she had committed an act of cruelty he could barely comprehend. She had thrown out a young mother and a 3-year-old child into the cold night, leaving them homeless and helpless. His hands began to shake. The vegetables he had been holding fell to the ground. The neighbors noticed him then, their faces filling with concern and awkwardness. They hadn't realized he was listening. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything you just said, is it true?" The elderly woman who had offered her shed looked at him with compassion. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she said softly. "But yes, every word is true. We saw it with our own eyes. Your wife drove them away. Huyen had done nothing wrong, except marry a man who made terrible choices. She didn't deserve what happened to her." The old man thanked them with a stiff nod and turned toward home. Each step felt heavier than the last. His mind was a storm of emotions: rage at his wife's deception, guilt for the anger he had directed at innocent Huyen, and overwhelming heartbreak at the thought of his little Maya suffering in the cold, hungry and scared, while he remained ignorant of her pain. By the time he reached his house, his grief had transformed into a fury, unlike anything he had ever felt. The door slammed open with such force that it rattled on its hinges. His wife looked up from her cooking, startled by the sound. She opened her mouth to greet him, but the words died on her lips when she saw his face. She had never seen him look like this, not in all their years together. His eyes blazed with an emotion that made her step back instinctively. "Husband, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You look upset. Did something happen at work?" "Don't," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't pretend. Don't ask me innocent questions as if you don't know." She set down her cooking spoon with shaking hands. "I don't understand what you mean. Please tell me what's troubling you. Where are Huyen and Maya?" he demanded, stepping closer. "Tell me exactly what happened the night they left this house." The color drained from her face. "I've already told you," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Huyen decided she couldn't bear the shame anymore. She took Maya and left in the middle of the night. I woke up and they were gone. "Liar!" The word exploded from him like a gunshot. "I just spoke with the neighbors. They told me everything. They saw you that night. They heard you." She stumbled backward, her eyes wide with panic. "The neighbors! They're mistaken. It was dark. They couldn't have seen clearly." "You believe gossip over your own wife?" He laughed, but it was a bitter, painful sound. "Mistaken? Multiple people all telling the same story?" Mrs. Lan described exactly what Huyen was wearing. Mr. Tung heard Maya crying for her grandmother, begging you not to send them away. And old Mrs. Fung, she was the one who gave them shelter in her broken shed because you had thrown them out into the cold night with nowhere to go. His wife's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The lies she had carefully constructed were crumbling around her. "Tell me the truth," he said, his voice breaking now, the anger giving way to desperate pain. "Tell me what you did to my granddaughter. Tell me what you did to Huyen, who had done nothing wrong except marry our foolish son." She sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. For a long moment, silence filled the room except for the crackling of the cooking fire. Then finally, she spoke. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I sent them away. I told them to leave and never come back." The admission hit him like a physical blow. Even though he had known, hearing her confess it made it real in a way that devastated him. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. "Why would you do such a thing? Maya was 3 years old. 3. She was your granddaughter." "Because I was angry," his wife cried out, tears streaming down her face now. "Our son was in prison because of his stupidity. We had no money. Huyen and the child were just more mouths to feed, more burden to carry. I thought if they were gone, our life would be easier. I thought you would never know. So you lied to me," he said, the words heavy with betrayal. "You let me believe that Huyen had abandoned us. You let me hate her, resent her, when all along she was the victim of your cruelty." His hand rose, trembling with rage. His wife flinched, closing her eyes, waiting for the blow. In that moment, he wanted nothing more than to strike her, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused. But his hand stopped in midair. He saw himself reflected in the window, arm raised, face twisted with fury. And something inside him broke. This wasn't who he was. This wasn't who he wanted to be. Violence would solve nothing, would heal nothing. He lowered his hand slowly and stepped back. "I have been married to you for over 30 years, he said quietly. "I thought I knew you. I thought you had a good heart. But the woman who could throw a mother and child into the street, who could lie to her husband for months, Who could let a 3-year-old suffer in poverty and cold? I don't know that woman. Please, she sobbed, falling to her knees. Please forgive me. I know what I did was wrong. I've known it every day since. I was cruel and selfish, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me. I've learned my lesson. I'll do anything to make it right. But he turned away from her, unable to look at her face any longer. He walked outside and sat heavily on the wooden steps of their small house. The evening air was cool against his face, but he barely felt it. His whole body felt numb, as if his heart had shut down to protect itself from the overwhelming pain. Images flooded his mind, unbidden and torturous. He saw Maya as she had been the last time he held her, just days before his son's arrest. She had been so small, so trusting, wrapping her tiny arms around his neck and calling him Grandpa in her sweet voice. She had loved to sit on his lap while he told her stories about the mountains and the rivers. Now he imagined that same little girl on a cold night, clutching her mother's hand, being pushed out into the darkness. He imagined her confusion and fear, not understanding why her grandmother was being so mean, why they had to leave their home. He imagined her shivering in that broken shed Mrs. Puong had mentioned, hungry because there was no food, scared because there was no safety. And Huyen, poor Huyen, who had married his son with hope and love, only to have her life shattered. Her husband imprisoned for his reckless gambling and drinking. Her mother-in-law turning her back with cruelty instead of compassion. And then he himself, her father-in-law, believing lies and harboring resentment against her when she had done nothing to deserve it. The guilt was crushing. How many times had he thought angry thoughts about Huyen? How many times had he told himself that she was selfish for taking Maya away? All those months, he could have been searching for them, helping them. But instead, he had believed his wife's lies and let them suffer alone. Tears began to roll down his weathered cheeks. He had failed them both. He had failed in his duty as a grandfather, as a father-in-law, as a man. He should have questioned his wife's story more carefully. He should have searched for Huyen and Maya himself instead of accepting such a convenient explanation. But there was something else in his heart now, alongside the grief and guilt. There was gratitude, because according to what the neighbors had said, Huyen and Maya weren't alone anymore. They had found help. They had found a man named D, a good man from what he had heard in village gossip. Someone who worked hard at the docks, who had taken in Huyen and Maya and given them the safety and care they deserved. This D had done what he himself should have done. This stranger had shown his family the kindness and protection that their own blood relatives had denied them. The thought was humbling and painful, but also brought a small measure of comfort. At least they were safe now. At least Maya had food and shelter and someone who cared for her. He thought about Dia, this man he had never met. From what he had heard, Dee had his own story of heartbreak, a wife who had abandoned him for wealth. Yet despite his own pain, he had opened his heart and home to a struggling mother and child. That took a special kind of person, someone with real strength and genuine goodness. And now, he had heard, Day and Huyen had found love together. They were building a life, creating a real family. Maya was happy, cared for, growing up with two people who truly loved her. The thought brought him both joy and sorrow. Joy that they had found happiness, sorrow that he wasn't part of it. He knew what he had to do. He had to find them. He had to see Huyen face to face and apologize for believing the worst of her, for not protecting her when she needed protection. He had to hold his granddaughter Maya again and tell her how much he had missed her, how sorry he was for being absent from her life. He didn't know if Huyen would forgive him. He didn't know if she would even want to see him. But he had to try. He had to make amends for his failure, even if it was too late to undo the damage. The sun was setting now, painting the highland sky in shades of gold and purple. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would begin searching for them. Tomorrow he would start trying to make things right. The truth always finds its way to the light, no matter how deeply it's buried in lies. In this small highland village, a father discovered the painful reality that his wife had driven away his innocent daughter-in-law and beloved granddaughter, while he had spent months wrongly blaming the very person who deserved his protection and support. The old man now knows that Huyen didn't abandon her family. She was cast out, left to face the world alone, with a 3-year-old child, surviving through hardship until kindness found her, in the form of De, a good man with his own scars, but an open heart. Though the revelation has shattered his trust and broken his heart, it has also awakened his determination to make amends. But will he find Huyen and Maya? Will Huyen be willing to forgive the father-in-law who believed lies instead of searching for the truth? Can this fractured family find a way to heal? And what will happen when the old man meets De, the stranger who gave his family the love they deserved? Thank you for watching Life Single. Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Join us in the next episode to see what happens when the past and present finally collide. Will forgiveness be possible, or has too much damage been done? Don't miss it.